Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Quidu, and Caritas, as you know, is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. And we do this through various online presentations and interviews with guest speakers, such as today, as well as classes and study groups, which we also have online. We draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science and consciousness, spirituality, and philosophy. And we've been doing this since 2003, but we weren't always online. In 2020, we began recording our presentations on Zoom. Our video recordings are viewable through our website, caritascenter.org, and also on our YouTube channel, which is Caritas Consciousness Project. And we have somewhere upwards of 80, somewhere between 80 and 90 presentations on our channel already. And so as a nonprofit organization, we do rely on the support of our members and donors to keep us going. If you enjoy our presentations and would like to support this program, please make a donation or become a member by going to our website. And there are benefits to membership, and they only start at $10 a month. So it's a great idea. And now let me introduce tonight's speaker, who is Rebekah Hirsch, astrologer and artist and healer. She's been an astrologer for over 30 years. In recent years, her understanding of astrology has shifted to a profound experience of the planetary archetypes, both as elemental currents comprising a person's human energy field, and also as a powerful living presence in the universal field. Rebekah is an advanced level graduate of the Brennan School of Healing in the US, as well as a professional archetypal astrologer, having trained with Liz Greene and Howard Sasportas at the Center for Psychological Astrology in London. She's also a trainer and facilitator of the transpersonal work known as voice dialogue. She lives in London, where she runs a private practice as an energy healer and astrologer. Rebekah's book, Charting the Soul, Astrology, Characterology, and the Human Energy Field, available on Amazon, is a synthesis of archetypal astrology and the Brennan approach. Rebekah runs her own Charting the Soul workshops based on the themes from her book. She regularly gives lectures at the Astrological Lodge of London and other astrology groups, as well as teaching voice dialogue. And she's also a visionary painter. And if you've seen the flyer that I sent out, all the illustrations, all the images on that flyer were painted by Rebekah. So welcome, Rebekah, and it's wonderful to have you here once again to start us off in the new year.
Yep. Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna just set up my screen. I think this is the one. Yep. There we go.
There you go.
So, when I was a teenager in 1967, the Beatles brought out their Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. And I just became a total hippie at that time. And when I look back, you know, and then I went to see Hair in London, the musical, and it kind of, you know, when I look back, I think, yeah, that was the dawning of the age of Aquarius. But actually, we don't know. There isn't a specific moment at which the age of Aquarius begins. It's not, there isn't the kind of line in the sky. Let's see what. Yeah, the age of Aquarius. These are big ages lost for 2,000 years. Nobody's really clear when the beginning is, but we're in it. I have no doubt that we are in the beginning of the age. Something is changing. And just talking to Gloria just now, it doesn't feel comfortable. It's not like we're having a picnic. It's not like these last few years have been super. I would say a lot of people in the world are pretty traumatized by many events, but particularly perhaps by the pandemic. And that feeling of living in very troubled times, this kind of living in an earthquake zone, this is part of what is happening, the big shift that we are living through. And yeah, that gives you a bit of an idea. I don't think I'm going to try to explain the astronomy of this, but every 2,000 years we move into the next wave. And so, you know, you think back to the time of the Romans, that was the age of Aries, and Aries is not just about the warrior energy. A lot of creative things happened in the age of Aries. And then at the age of Pisces, you know, very much began, or one of the things that happened at the beginning of the age of Pisces was the birth of Jesus Christ, but it also, there are other, you know, Buddha and Hindu, Shiva, these kind of deities go with the age of Pisces, and they bring in compassion and something about looking up, looking for love, looking for divine contact. And here we are now, and something else is trying to happen. So let's go back. The age of Aquarius. Aquarius is it's an air sign. People think that it's a water sign because it's the water carrier. It's not. It's an air sign. In fact, I've got a slide further on. I'm going to click along to that. Yeah. These are some of the issues associated with Aquarius. It's an air sign. The element is air. That means it's a mental sign. It's a thinking, analyzing kind of sign, whereas the sign of Pisces was more emotional, water feeling sign. And Aquarius rules electricity, it rules the World Wide Web, it rules all kinds of things to do, scientific advances, networks, groups. It's also the sign of the humanitarian, the ruling planet of Aquarius. I forgot to say, by the way, please do put an electronic hand up or write something in the chat if you have a question, and I will stop for questions periodically, just so that, you know, if something doesn't click or if you have a response to something, do please share it. Uranus, which is the planet that rules the sign of Aquarius, was discovered at the time of the French and the American revolutions. And so Aquarius has to do with those kind of, one of the biggest things for Aquarius is freedom. However, if we think of some of the big revolutions of the last century and the one before, they don't always end well. You know, certainly the Russian and the Chinese revolutions, they don't seem to have led to an increase in freedom, in personal freedom. You could argue that the American Revolution isn't really finished. Maybe the French, but that ended with enormous violence. That these are some of the themes that are up for us. Science, the advancing of science, the advancing of technology. And I think we've definitely seen in my lifetime that the human beings are able to make advances in technology at a faster rate than the growth of wisdom. That is to say that we are able to do things with technology, with science, with all those things like genetic engineering, and without having the patience to wait and see if they really are going to be beneficial. So we see all kinds of, you know, cranky things happening, not to mention Elon Musk, you know, going to Mars or whatever, you know, lots of scientific leaps that can be taken. And maybe one of the big issues is learning the lessons of the age of Pisces, learning about compassion and communion, so that we and respect for the earth as well, which is, you know, which is important, and taking that with us, because I think the technology is coming. There's a lot of people in my generation, a lot of my friends, you know, in love with nature, more contact with nature, more contact with the feminine, with the goddess, with the body, and a lot of anxiety about the you know, climate change and the impact on the planet. But I don't think we can turn the clock back, especially not because this is what is happening, because we are moving into the age of Aquarius. I don't think that people are going to give up on their computers and their mobile phones and that you know, incredible level of communication that we have. That was just not in existence in my childhood. And my young nieces and nephews, you know, talk about artificial intelligence, not in it's like, oh my God, you know, science fiction, a horror story kind of thing, but this is coming. And so, you know, when I look at that, I think, well, then it's a race between the just the hugely expanding technology and the wisdom, which is also coming. It's not that it's not here, because it is. The last time I saw Gloria, I was in Colorado in 2019, and I had the most amazing trip. I was in America for 2 weeks. I went to San Francisco as well. And every single day that I was there, I met an amazing person. I met people who were on a shamanic path. I met dream workers. I met spiritual workers, you know, and it wasn't that I met a lot of them. It was every single day there was some new adventure. I went to see a man in San Francisco who I knew in childhood, you know, he's a school friend of my brother. And it turns out he's on a big shamanic path, and we're walking along the beach and picking up feathers and drumming. Anyway, it's a wonderful trip. And on my way home, I was thinking, I was in, you know, plane took off, and I'm thinking, well, what was that? What happened? What happened that this was so amazing? And, you know, with my sort of guidance, I just saw the whole world like that image in the middle of the screen there with all these little lights all over the world. And these are all the people all over the planet who are doing the work of consciousness, who are meeting in groups, who are meditating together, therapy groups, whatever, they're coming together. And when they come together, there's this, you know, little portal opens up to other dimensions, to the heavenly realms. And that what I was seeing was the whole world is building this network of light, of consciousness. And that is the age of Aquarius. It's so much about the group, and it's so much about the evolution of consciousness. I'll come back to that. I'll talk more about Aquarius, but the next thing that is happening, I've lost the dates. Where are they? I might. Oh, they're there. This year, so we've been through, I mean, I think anybody who knows anything about astrology knows that 2020 had a very, very difficult lineup of planets. Not a lot of astrologers saw the pandemic. They saw great difficulty. They didn't see the pandemic. But it has been a difficult time. And it is changing. So we're not just going to leap into the age of Aquarius, because we've got 2,000 years of that. So we're right at the beginning. And that's why we kind of feel as if we're living in an earthquake, because everything is trying to change. And we're having to ride these waves and to deal with whatever it brings up. And I think, see, everybody was asking, when Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct at 0 degrees of Aquarius in the winter solstice 2020, everyone was saying, is this it? Is this the end of the pandemic? Are we through? And I don't think we are. But I do feel that this year now, in 2023, things are kind of speeding up, and we are moving a little bit away from some of the real shocks that we experienced in the last few years. And one of the big changes, 16 years, Pluto's been traveling, the little planet Pluto, traveling through the sign of Capricorn. And on the 24th of March, Pluto enters Aquarius. It goes into 0 degrees of Aquarius. And the same month, Saturn has been in Aquarius, will leave Aquarius and move into Pisces, and Jupiter is moving into Taurus. So there's quite a lot of change. And with Pluto, I think it's like 70 days, and then it retrogrades back into Capricorn. And we finish this year with more of Pluto in Capricorn. And then 2024, Pluto's really moving into Aquarius, and it has a little stint back in Capricorn. But at the end of 24, it's through. And then we have 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius, and whatever changes that will bring. So I'm going to talk, before I talk more about Aquarius, I'm going to talk about Pluto. Any questions at the moment about the age of Aquarius, about the age of Pisces, about this change that is happening, or are people happy to move on?
Sharon, you have to unmute yourself.
No, I was just doing a thumbs up to say I'm good.
Oh. Sorry, thought you were raising your hand.
Okay.
So everybody good? No questions, no comments so far? Okay.
So I wanted to do this talk, and I wanted to focus because this is important. Pluto entering the sign of Aquarius for the next 20 years, well, for 20 years from next year. It's a big deal. You know,
Rebekah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would you explain to those who might not know about how it goes direct, then retrograde, then direct
Yeah. All of astrology is what we call geocentric. That is, it's all from the Earth. So it's not as if you were the sun looking out at the solar system, or in the heart of the galaxy looking out at the solar system. It's from the Earth. And the essence of astrology is we look out at the heavens and we watch the changes, and we watch the different waves moving through. How is it going to impact us? How is it going to, what does it mean for the human race, for the inhabitants of planet Earth? So what that means is it's very easy to kind of get the hang of watching the planets, because you'll notice, you'll often notice where Venus is, if Venus is following the setting sun, or if Venus is rising with the dawn. Obviously, the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, you can only see with a telescope. But Jupiter and Saturn, you can see them as they move across the sky. And because we are going around the sun and they are going around the sun, every now and then, well, at least 2 times a year, the planets look as if they, instead of going forward in their path, they appear to go backwards. And that's when they go retrograde. And everybody knows about Mercury going direct and retrograde, because that's a very popular thing these days on social media, that nobody's going backwards. Nobody's actually moving backwards. It just appears that the planet, so right now, today, if you were looking through a telescope, Uranus in the sky looks as though it's absolutely stationary. It hasn't moved for a couple of days, stayed in the same place, hasn't inched along as it normally does. And tomorrow, Uranus will start moving direct. So it has been retrograde, looks as though it's moving backwards. Tomorrow, it will start moving forward. When a planet is retrograde, and that is Mercury, Venus, all of them, there's nothing to fear. I mean, everybody knows when Mercury goes retrograde, and then the phones don't work and the trains don't work, whatever, everything seems to stop. That I don't know, I don't know how much truth. Somebody should do a study and see whether that more happens. I do have to say, I know 2 people who had major accident when Mercury went direct the other day. When the planets go retrograde, it's as though they've been traveling direct along their path, and the retrograde is like an in-breath. It's like an assimilation. Like, what have we learned? What has this planet been teaching? So if you're dying to sell your house or get in a new relationship, then the retrograde can feel difficult, because it's like the tide's going out, the waves are pulling backwards, and events in the physical world don't move forward so quickly. It's not a mistake, and it's not, you're not being picked on. It's the thing that we're not so good at is that patience, and it's that wisdom again. It's like, okay, now is not the time. So let's be still and let's reflect. What does it mean? And what have I learned? And then, as in today, the planet Uranus is stationary in the sky, and then tomorrow it'll start going direct. And that's when events start happening in the physical world, because the flow of energy is going forward again, like a wave coming in. But it's not something to be feared. It's a sort of skill to spotting a retrograde and working with it, and that is to be more reflective, take more time, be more patient, and what is it? What's the teaching? What's the learning here? And it's when the planets go direct that sometimes you get the life lessons. So Pluto's doing this dance at the edge between the cusp between Capricorn and Aquarius. It's going to pop into Aquarius, it's going to retrograde out, it's going in again for longer, come out for a short time, and then it's in. And it gives us a little bit of time to assimilate things. But the thing, and Gloria and I were just talking about it, the thing about Pluto, in Greek mythology, he's the lord of the underworld. He's the king and lord of the dead. And in psychological terms, the archetype of Pluto and the meaning of the underworld and the of Hades is what is unconscious. So we love the sun, we love Jupiter, we love Venus, we like the planets of consciousness, the bright planets that that shine and they bring happiness and expansion and so on. And we kind of fear the dark. And we fear the unconscious, and we're not so happy, with the moon, especially in the dark of the moon. And this is the realm of Pluto. Pluto was discovered in the early 20th century, mid 20th century. And it was at the time when Freud and Jung were coming up with their theories, and there was a massive expansion of interest in psychology. And the psychologists of that time bringing out more and more papers talking about the unconscious, Jung developing all his theories about the dream world, about the archetypes. And so this awareness that we kind of live in a little kind of sunlit pool of consciousness with all the things that we know and the things that we trust, and our relationships and our families and our work and our environment. And then outside of that is this vast realm of the unconscious and the dream world. And this is Pluto's realm. And the myth that everybody knows about Pluto is Pluto and Persephone. And I don't have the picture, so I'll just do that. So Persephone is the daughter of the goddess of the harvest, Demeter. I always get their names mixed up. Demeter's Roman, Persephone. No, Persephone is the daughter of Ceres. That's the Greek name. And she's totally innocent. She's a sweet young thing. Her mother adores her. She has no problems, and she lives this innocent life. Innocent sunlit life. And one day she's out playing in the fields and she picks a narcissus, which is the flower of Pluto, the flower of the underworld, and the earth opens up. Out comes Pluto riding in his black chariot with his black horses. He seizes Persephone, drags her into the chariot and disappears back under the earth and drags her down into the underworld. And then at the end of the day, Ceres comes to get her and can't see her. And where is Persephone? Has anybody seen Persephone? Nobody's seen Persephone. Nobody knows where she is. And Ceres becomes more and more and more distraught. And eventually Hecate, the witch goddess, who also is an inhabitant of the underworld, says she's in the underworld. Pluto's got her. And then Ceres is absolutely distraught. And she's the goddess of the harvest. She's the goddess of fertility. And at that point, she stops anything from growing. There's no fruit. There's no harvest. And she wanders the earth grieving. And she calls on Zeus to help. And eventually, there's a terrible famine on the earth because Ceres won't let anything grow. And so Zeus does send Hermes, the messenger god, down into the underworld and to meet with Hades and Persephone, and they have talk, and it's agreed that Persephone will be allowed to return to the upper world. And there's one condition, and that is that she has eaten nothing while she's in the underworld. And of course, in the myth, what has happened is that Pluto, or Hades, has given her a pomegranate, and she's eaten 6 seeds of the pomegranate. And the way they work that out is that she will spend 6 months living in the underworld with Pluto, or Hades is the Greek name, and the other 6 months of the year she'll live with Ceres, her mother. So when Persephone's returned to the upper world, that's the spring, so she's the goddess of the spring, and there's great joy, and then everything's fertile and everything blossoms and grows. And in the autumn, she returns to the underworld, and that is when everything dies back and the winter comes. And the point of this story is it's about consciousness. See if I can get, oops, that one, back into the images. So when Pluto came and dragged Persephone away, she was completely innocent. And she didn't know about life. And in her time in the underworld, she changed. And she stopped being a little girl. And she developed into a woman. And in some of the mythology, they say it was a choice for her to eat the pomegranate seeds because she wanted to fulfill her destiny. So she becomes the queen of the underworld. And she lives half of her life in the sunshine and half in the underworld with Pluto. And she's become powerful. And one of the key words to go with Pluto is power. She's become a queen. She's not a little girl, and she's become conscious. And this is what Pluto is all about. It's about consciousness. And let's this. I think I'm just going to talk about this. So if we think back to the years that Pluto was going through Capricorn, and I've just put a list up here. You may, some of them happened in the UK, and people may not recognize them, but these are some of the events that have occurred. The astonishing thing was that the stock market crash happened within weeks of Pluto going into Capricorn. So Capricorn, I'll come back to that list. These are the kind of things that we think of when we think of Capricorn. Capricorn is a sign about structure. It's about society. It's about being a human being living on planet Earth. And what are the laws? What are the rules? What works? What doesn't work? What are the principles of manifestation? How am I going to make it in this life? There is a very spiritual side to Capricorn, but I'm not thinking of that. I'm thinking of how do a bunch of human beings live together without murdering each other, without it being, complete chaos, anarchy. What are the rules? What about money? What about achievement? I haven't put so much on here about ambition. And it's about, here I am, I've got my 70, 80, whatever it is, maybe 90 years these days of life on Earth. What am I going to do with my life on Earth? What am I going to achieve? It's got a lot to do with career. It's got a lot to do with success. It's got a lot to do with ambition. But it has a lot to do with the law and the nature of society, and with politicians and with money. And if we go back to this list of events that have occurred while Pluto has been transiting Capricorn, boy, have we had a lot of stuff dragged out from the unconscious. we have been confronted, we've been right from the start, we've been confronted about our financial setup. And in the years while Pluto's been in Capricorn, we've seen a very extreme, rather unprecedented shift of wealth. Used to be more evenly distributed. Now it's in, there are these ridiculous things like, 10 people in the world own more wealth than the rest of it combined. And certainly in the UK, we've seen a growth in poverty and homelessness and things like that. We have food banks in the UK, which we didn't have food banks when I was young. So financially, there's been quite a lot of challenging stuff going on. We had the WikiLeaks, whatever you think of Assange and Snowden and Manning, that is so Pluto. It's like somebody going down into the underworld and releasing all these documents and bringing it into the light of day, in the light of consciousness. And oh my God. I remember the deep water. Do you remember the Deepwater Horizon when they drilled an incredibly deep well? I think it was in the Caribbean. And then it sprung a leak. It was the deepest well that had ever been drilled. And at one point, it might not be possible to stop it leaking because it was so deep and they didn't have the technology. And I just thought, whoa, all this black stuff oozing up from the underworld. We have, we have the reaction to the financial. We had Occupy. We have the Arab Spring, which was actually more to do with Uranus. But anyway, let's change the politics. Let's have more justice. Another, natural disaster, the tsunami that hit Japan, but the great threat from the nuclear power station. Nuclear power goes with Pluto. The first splitting of the atom was just at the time when Pluto had been discovered, the dropping of the atomic bomb. We think of that with Pluto. The Sandy Hook and the school shootings that you've experienced in America. And then we're starting, with the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and the Black Lives Matter starts. And it's like, this is not okay. These things that are happening in our society, they're not okay. And Pluto is bringing it to consciousness, bringing it into light. I don't know how much you were impacted in America with 1 billion rising. That was when a lovely young woman, a young doctor in India, was murdered and raped and murdered horribly on a bus. And there was a huge uprising of women in India. It's like, enough. You can't keep treating women this way. And then, moving on, we've got the war in the Middle East, the war in Iraq, and then if you remember, the surge of ISIS, which was very scary when that happened, and atrocities being committed in the war in Syria. Moving on a bit, get to 2016, we get Trump versus Clinton. And in the UK, we had the vote to leave the European Union. And there was such shocking moments for many when Trump got elected, and so much. Grenfell Tower, great tragedy in London when a tower block caught fire, and it seemed like, the building of the tower block had been very faulty, and they'd used not very flammable cladding. A lot of people died. And then there was a lot of corruption around that as well. Then you get the arrest of Harvey Weinstein and the Me Too women. Apparently 19 million women did the hashtag Me Too at that time. The water protests, Standing Rock. I've put the election of Bolsonaro in Brazil because there was a lot of corruption and dodgy stuff. And he's the guy who, tried to, he's not there anymore, but to take away the rights of the indigenous people in Brazil. And he was sort of, giving leeway to miners to strip the Amazon forest and destroy it. 2019, I mean, whoa, that was such an amazing time in England because we'd never had this before. And Boris Johnson tries to prorogue Parliament. Again, this is, you know, this is politics. This is like, whoa, you know, this is not good. This is not honest. This is not honorable. This is not straight. The death of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and then COVID. And everything that we've seen in COVID, all the stuff, and the dividing of the world into the anti-vaxxers and the pro-vaxxers. Gosh, you know, I've forgotten to put on this list all the stuff about the gender wars that we experience in the UK. The storming of the Capitol, you know, and then in my country, the UK has 3 prime ministers in 3 months. Anyway, that is Pluto traveling through Capricorn, and this is what it's doing. This is how, this is the work of Pluto. This is the god of the underworld going down into what is not seen and bringing it up to the light of consciousness. The reason I'm doing this is because we have to think then, looking ahead for the 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius, what's going to be coming up from, you know, what's in the unconscious? What do we not know about our groups, about our networks? Aquarius is also a political sign. I'm just going to talk about this. So, but Pluto deals with the shadow. And in psychological terms, you know, if you, especially on anyone on a transpersonal Jungian path, there's so much work to be done of finding about what is lost, what has been lost to us in the unconscious. And I remember Greene once saying, if you think you know what your shadow is, you don't, because the nature of the shadow is it's not conscious. And if you're conscious of it, that's not it. It's what is not conscious, what is hidden, what's in the dark, what's in the down with the land of the dead, what's in Pluto's realm. And in there, there'll be, you know, there's a lot of stuff recently about our ancestral inheritance and how trauma experienced by the ancestors will be passed down through the DNA. And there's also the collective. And this the fact that whether we're conscious of it or not, we are kind of part of this fantastic group, which is the human race, or all of life on Earth. And when you're working with the shadow, you're kind of turning away from the light and you're looking into the shadow. What is it that I need to bring into consciousness? Sometimes it's traumatic experiences from childhood that have left you with a whole set of images about the way life is. And then you can start to unlearn those rules that may not be right for you. I will just tell this story. My dear dad, is passed now, but I was living with him in the end of his life. And one night he just started talking, and he's just talking in a very strange way. I'd never heard him talk before. And he was talking in the first person. I am a little boy. I am carrying my suitcase. I am walking through the dark. My sister is with me. So my dad was a refugee. He was born in Berlin. And when he was 5 years old, they had to flee from Berlin and they came to England. And I sort of sitting listening to him, and I thought, oh my God, he's there. He's back again. I'm walking along, and with my mummy, I don't know where my daddy is. We're getting on the train. It's all dark. I'm scared. And we come to the sea. And he went through the whole journey of their flight from Berlin to the coast, and getting on the boat and sailing across the English Channel and arriving in England where his father was. And I just listened to this and I just thought, wow. This is, this is so powerful, and he's never talked about it in my life. This is, so much at the base of my father's personality, the trauma of leaving everything you'd ever known and the language, the only language, and traveling through the dark to escape the Holocaust. And I'm sure as eggs, that'll be somewhere in my unconscious, that it's in me. That's my ancestral inheritance. And just to look at the Minotaur, the unconscious, it can be a labyrinth. It can be that when Pluto goes into the dark, when you go there, it's not easy. If we wanted to know what was in the unconscious, it wouldn't be there. It would be unconscious. If it was easy for us to know, it wouldn't have been banished to the dark. And so there's a great fear, looking at the Minotaur, that what is held in the unconscious is something monstrous and terrible. And there is a thing called the golden shadow, where we repress beautiful parts of us, loving, creative, and they get repressed in childhood. So the work of the shadow, working on the shadow, working to bring whatever needs to be brought into consciousness. So we've done that. Any questions before I'm going to oh yes, I will just say this. Pluto's the Lord of the Dead, and he's scary as the Lord of the Dead and the Lord of the Underworld, and the Minotaur and the Gorgons and all the monsters are down there in the unconscious, and all the images of childhood and all the nightmares and the images we get in scary dreams. But he's also a sign of birth and rebirth. And so, I mean, Gloria and I were just saying, it's like, when are we going to see the rebirth from the journey of Pluto through Capricorn? Because we're not seeing it yet. We're still seeing a lot of darkness and a lot of abuse of power and a lot of political shenanigans and a lot of financial screw-ups. But there will be a birth. Something will come from it. There will be an enormous growth of consciousness. Maybe it is already here, that grows from these experiences. So the experience in itself is difficult to confront some of the darkness in our world. But out of that, something new is born. And I don't think there's anybody here who think that we don't need to do this. We do need to get the dark stuff, the stuff from the underworld, the stuff that we need to bring it into consciousness. And birth, anything new. Pluto is the planet of transformation. More than any other planet, when in your personal astrology, if you get a transit from Pluto, it can be incredibly challenging, especially young people. Now, I always worry when I see a young person getting like a transit of Pluto to their moon or their ascendant. But it does bring change. It really is the phoenix. Like it brings consciousness and it brings power. And that is what Pluto is really about, is about power. And it doesn't mean it. Very often we experience Pluto as power over. That is, one person having all the money, all the power, all the wealth, corruption, spies and underhand manipulations and things, as people competing over the power. But actually what Pluto wants us to learn is our own power. Goes with martial arts. In terms of the human energy field, I associate it with the Tantien, that source of raw power that lives in the belly, lives in the guts, instincts, and the source of creativity in the body, in the life of the body. All the cells of the body taking in energy, digesting the sugars, turning it into energy. The miracle of the human body. I mean, we have no idea. I don't know if we have the capacity to conceptually hold all the processes that are happening in the body all the time, all the little electrons traveling down the nervous system, all the impulses going to the muscles, all the action of the heart pumping the blood, you know, and this is Pluto as well, that these things just keep happening. And we get raw energy from Pluto. And the journey of consciousness, the journey into the shadow, we bring more of ourself into consciousness and we gain a greater sense of personal power. And that is, you know, in the end is what Pluto wants us to know. It's also a sign very, very much to do with healing. Go into the underworld, go into the dark, bring out what you find there. And one of the interpretations of the name of Pluto in Roman times was treasure, because it's buried treasure that we don't, you know, we run from the contents of the unconscious. We don't want to know that, we don't want to know about the trauma. But when we bring them in and when we integrate them and assimilate them, they liberate treasure. For they give us life force, they give us access to our own authentic power, not the power to dominate somebody else or be the victim of somebody else or sneak around behind, but our own authentic power. This is who I am. I accept myself as I am, and this is the creative force that I am bringing to my life through the body. So that is the nature of Pluto. You know, all astrologers, we fear Pluto. It can bring depression, it can bring abuse, it can bring experience of disempowerment, and it can bring death, and it can bring destruction, and you know, can bring the hopes and dreams to an end. And the lesson is, you know, is to hold on and stay conscious and stay loving, and out of the ashes of what has been destroyed and what has been lost and what has been recovered rises the phoenix and access to the life force. And it is really miraculous the way that Pluto does this, that you know, that when a person has a transit of Pluto, how it renews the life force and how much more of yourself you have at the end of a Pluto transit. And maybe we, you know, it's like we're not living in very joyful times, because you know, there have been a lot of losses, you know, losses of those who have lost life during the pandemic, losses of hope. During this journey of Pluto through Capricorn, I feel very much for young people who feel, you know, that their future has been taken away from them, that the paths that their parents took through life are no longer open to them. And this is Pluto in Capricorn, and it's tough. And you know, at least half the population of the UK do not, they're still grieving. They haven't got over it, that we're no longer part of the European Union. And in the USA, things are not resolved about the storming of the Capitol and about Trump and, you know, all the legal shenanigans that are still going on. So it's not like it's an easy time. And we're coming to the end of the cycle of Pluto in Capricorn, and it's not turning into a picnic, but I think it has brought an enormous wave of consciousness. That when we were young, these things were probably always happening and we didn't realize. For sure, racism was always happening in terrible ways when we were young. And for sure, you know, sexism, gender discrimination, and homophobia, and you know, all those things, for sure as eggs, were happening when we were young. And they need to come into consciousness so that we can deal with them and transform them. And I think that is what we're being left with. This is the treasure that we're left with after the journey of Pluto through Capricorn, is that our culture, our society, we need change. You know, things are not okay. And right now it's not clear how to change, but I think the awareness of of all of us. It's been a very, and then climate change. How could I forget that? Again, for the young people, they have every reason to be afraid, looking to the future. So I'm going to pause there for a minute and do just say if I'll stop sharing. Yeah. If anybody's got a question or a thought, I know sometimes people at talks are also astrologers. If you've got a comment, what the journey of Pluto to Capricorn might have meant to you. Yeah, Sharon. And yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You mentioned one or more friends who had an accident. I got the impression it was maybe an automobile related. And you mentioned Mercury. I was just kind of curious, what date was that?
The 17th.
Okay.
A couple of days ago. And then a couple of days before that, Mars went direct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And tomorrow, Uranus goes direct. So everybody drive really, really carefully tomorrow. Oh. Any other thoughts?
Yes. I appreciate your comparing Capricorn and Aquarius, because they are both society based, and so I'm a little fuzzy on. Anyway, I think I got a little clarity out of that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll say some more about that in a minute. Yeah. Yes. They're both ruled by Saturn. So in ancient times, before the discovery of Uranus, Saturn was also the ruler of Aquarius. Mm-hmm. So they're very different. I'm trying to think what they have in common. Maybe a love of structure.
Well, it just feels like Capricorn is the old structure, and Aquarius is let's blow it up and start over again.
Yeah.
But
yes. Saturn's much more rigid.
Well, Aquarius can sometimes become dogmatic.
Oh, that's true.
Right. And Saturn can be dogmatic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Different, isn't it? They do have a different. It's a fixed sign. So all the signs there are either cardinal, fixed, or mutable. So Capricorn is a cardinal sign, and they're about initiating and taking action. Mm-hmm. And Aquarius is a fixed sign, and it's more about containing and assimilating and keeping going. And the fixed signs don't deviate from their path very easily, and then you get the mutable signs, Pisces, Gemini, Sag, and Virgo, and they will change very easily. Mm-hmm. But Aquarius,
well, maybe the problem with Aquarius is it's I always call it static or stuck, because I have a lot of that energy, so that's how I see it. But it's also the sign of revolution, and I'm sorry, but revolution and maintaining just are different concepts, and they're both there.
Yes,
in Aquarius,
they are. Yes, that thing about the fixed signs, it being a fixed sign. That is I'll think about that.
Sharon, did you have another question, or did you just not lower your hand? Okay.
Yeah, I do have a second question. I was just curious, some of what Rebekah discussed toward the end, it just was reminiscent of the tarot card, the Tower. And I was just wondering, is she familiar with that? And
absolutely. Yes.
Am I sort of seeing is seeing a parallel there correct? Is that
Absolutely.
okay?
I think the times we are in is absolutely, if anybody knows the Tower, it's the tower. It's, the big collapse. You think you've got a solid structure that's going to last for millennia, and it's collapsing and it's crumbling as we just sit and watch. Unbelievable things that you couldn't have thought could have happened, 20 years are happening now. And traditionally, with the tarot, you do associate the tower with Uranus, with the planet Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius. Yeah. And so the first thing that I suppose that has to happen is that it all sort of falls apart. I really do believe that, that is the times we are in, where the political, financial, moral, everything structures, societal, cultural, that we thought we knew what they were in the 20th century, they're all up for grabs now. It all changed,
Well, in some of the descriptions or interpretations I've seen of the Tower card, although there's destruction, as you've talked about here, something better can come on the other side of that.
Absolutely.
That, necessary in order for that to be born.
Yeah. And that is, that is the times that we are in.
Okay.
It's that Uranian energy, the energy of the Tower, and the coming of Aquarius, and the old orders. They can't go on. And recently, I've been really feeling that. So it's like not a cerebral idea. It's like really feeling that something is changing, and in a good way. That that there's a level of consciousness. I will talk about this more at the end. That is coming. That is different. Wasn't there before. Wasn't there when I was young. And it's with us now.
Well,
so
you and I were talking about how, and you mentioned it earlier as well, about the patience that's required, right?
Yeah.
And it reminds me that Pluto, on the one hand, Pluto represents very slow moving and very fundamental change, right? We almost don't see it coming. We almost don't know it's happening until it's done. And then we see how everything's changed. Whereas Uranus represents very revolutionary, sudden change, quick change, right?
Yeah.
And so, but Uranus is going into Taurus. So how will that present?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, in all seriousness, do drive carefully tomorrow, because Uranus is stationary, going direct, and it does operate through sudden change, and it's a great one for car accidents and but other things happen on Uranus transits. You can just suddenly lose your job or whatever. And yes, it's quick, bam. That's gone. It's over. Sometimes, it's just dead. It's just gone. Whereas Pluto is much more subtle, much more working away at the foundations.
Yeah.
So let's okay. So let's go back. When you talk about Aquarius, there's and it fits with what we were just saying about, well, how is it different to Capricorn? There are two myths that go with Aquarius, and it's like there are two kind of sides to it. And I'm going to talk about this one. So and I talk about this all the time, and that, you know, it's just such an important, it's got such valuable information in it. This is the Greek creation myth. And so, you know, in the beginning, there was chaos. There was just stuff. And one of the first beings out of chaos comes Gaia. And she is the goddess who gives form to matter. She is, she out of the chaos, she summons matter, and she creates the earth, and she creates everything that is in the physical universe. She, you know, the heavens, the planet, the earth, the trees, the rivers, the mountains, everything is the creation of Gaia. You know, immensely powerful goddess of manifestation. So she creates this beautiful planet and this beautiful physical world. And then she creates Uranus, who is the god of the sky. And she also creates a god of the oceans. But the two that she starts with are Uranus and Pontus. And she's married to Uranus. Every night Uranus comes down and lies with Gaia. And she gets pregnant and she gives birth to new beings, to new life. And these are the Titans of Greek mythology, and they are the first of the immortal beings. And Uranus doesn't like the Titans that Gaia gives birth to. And they are things like they're the Cyclops with one eye, and maybe there's one with 100 eyes, and they are giants, and he doesn't like them. They are not perfect. And in his eyes, they're not beautiful. And he takes them and he hurls them back into the womb of Gaia, hurls them back into the earth, where they lie groaning. And Gaia doesn't like this. And so after, you know, enough is enough, after Uranus keeps doing this, she gives birth to Kronos. And she hides Kronos away so that Uranus can't attack him. And Kronos has a sickle. He's the master of time, and he leaps out on Uranus and he castrates him, and he takes the genitals and he throws them down into the ocean. And up out of the ocean, out of the seed of Uranus, rises Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. And Kronos then becomes the king, and eventually he's overthrown by Zeus. However, I was thinking, you know, as Gloria mentioned, Uranus, which is the same as Uranus, is now in Taurus. And I was thinking about Gaia and thinking, what happened? She's the most powerful being in the universe. She's created the whole universe. She's created human, you know, she creates everything. Why does she let this happen? That Uranus is so, you know, where does the violence come from? You know, I sometimes say, you know, why didn't the three of them just sit down and have a therapy session, you know, and get some mediation? Why do they have to kill each other, castrate each other? You know, where's the violence come from? Why does Uranus have to be so violent in his rejecting of his children? Why doesn't somebody talk to him and say, hey, that's your kid? You know, that doesn't happen. And throughout Greek mythology, violence is the rule. And I guess that goes back to the age of Aries, which is ruled by Mars, which is the warrior energy. And there's a lot of cruelty. But we seem to have internalized that the only way to deal with things is through violence. And I'm sick of it. You know, I always have to go and see these Marvel movies with my two sons because they were brought. We have to go and see Spider-Man and then Batman. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of these men punching each other. And you know, and then they get, you know, a female heroine and she's punching people as well. And what happened to Gaia? Where's her voice? How did she let this happen? How did the violence get there? And I think, I mean, there's no answer to that question. And the thing about Uranus And the thing about Uranus, and the thing we have to be careful of, is he's a completely mental energy. He's an idealist. He lives in the sky. He doesn't really occupy the body like Gaia does or like Kronos does. He's up in the sky. He's writing mathematical formulas. He's doing geometry. And he doesn't have feelings. And when you're talking about Uranus in astrology, the function of Uranus is not to feel. The function of Uranus is to think and have ideas and be original. He has the most original, imaginative, creative, scientific, mathematical, magical ideas. That he's not emotional. And he's not very embodied. And he doesn't like the body. He's not got that tolerance for the imperfections of human life. If you incarnate on this planet in this life, there will be trouble, there will be flaws. The Buddha said there will be suffering. And we will get old and we will get sick and we will lose loved ones. This is what this human planet is about. And one of the things I love about Pluto and the sign of Scorpio is their tolerance for the flaws of human nature. That because Pluto goes down into the underworld, he knows what is there. He knows that human beings don't get it right. And he accepts that. Uranus is an idealist and a perfectionist, and he just rejects. Oh, they're his children. He's created them. He rejects them. And along comes Kronos, which is Saturn, which is the ruler of Capricorn. And if we're looking at that edge between Aquarius and Capricorn, Aquarius, the idealist, the perfectionist, the genius, because they're out there in the cosmos writing magical formulas or creating unheard of music or whatever. They're not embodied in being human and in human love and in human flaws. And Kronos is Saturn, is all in, and Capricorn, all about life on Earth. Yes, we may have all come from the stars. Yes, Gaia came out of chaos. Yes, there's Christ out there, there's Buddha, there's all the deities, there are other dimensions. But what about here? What about this planet, this body? And so Kronos, Saturn, is the lord of time. And, out there in the realm of Uranus, there is no time. You just float from one idea to the next. But in the physical world, there is time. The whole space-time thing. There is weight, there is gravity, there is the functions of the body, there is the structures of the bones. Saturn Kronos, Capricorn rules the bones. What are the structures of life? What are the structures of society? What are the rules? What are the laws that make our society function? How do we make this life function? So I'm not interested in your dream world and your imaginal world. And I'm not in the spiritual dimensions. I'm not interested in the non-physical dimensions. For Kronos, Saturn, it's here. What is here? What is in this world, in this reality? And when Kronos sees that Uranus is not capable of really inhabiting this reality, that he only lives in the mind, and that he will not actually allow his creations to live, he castrates him. Right? No more castrations, no more, rejected children. And again, there's something about the violence of that. It's like somehow they need to learn from each other or from Gaia, and that tension is not resolved. In that Kronos is rigidly sticking to the material world and the law. Saturn, Kronos, Capricorn, a lot about the rules of science, like the mechanical rules that Newton developed. I would guess Aquarius would be more like the kind of pure maths, but that Capricorn is, does it work? Does it function? You know, is that bridge going to hold everything up, or is it going to collapse? Is this building going to, you know, is it going to work? Is the engineering sound? And this is the nature of these two archetypes. One is Kronos, not particularly emotional either, but he is of the body and he's of the physical world. Does it work? What's the law? What are the, you know, he's very keen on the rules, the gravity, or the law of the land, and kings and queens and prime ministers and presidents and political and authority figures in schools and hospitals. And does it work? Does it function? And when these two principles are at loggerheads, then it's kind of not creative, you know. Then because then Saturn castrates Uranus, so Uranus is great fountain of ideas and original thinking, and they have to learn from each other. They have to be able to work together. The ideal and the vision and the genius and the originality of Uranus needs to be fed through the hands of Kronos Saturn so that something can manifest. So that's the creation myth, and I'll come back to Gaia later on. The other myth that's very important, I think some people say this is the real mythology of Aquarius, is the myth of Prometheus. So Prometheus, he's one of the Titans. So he's one of the first gods. He's not an Olympian, which is the Olympian gods came with Zeus, who overthrew Kronos. But he's, you know, he's fine and powerful, and he is the creator of the human race. He takes some dirt and he creates the human race. And I think Pallas Athena breathes life into humanity. And Prometheus loves the human race. And he goes to Zeus and asks if he asks if he can give the human race the gift of fire. And Prometheus has the gift of foresight. That is, he can see the future. And Zeus says no. Zeus does not like the human race. And he says, no, you can't give them the gift of fire. And because he can see the future, Prometheus knows what will happen to him. Nevertheless, one night he goes to Olympus and he steals the sacred fire, the sacred flame that burns on Mount Olympus, and he takes it down to the plains, and he teaches the human beings how to use fire. And so we've been talking about, you know, maybe the Iron Age or whatever, when they're learning how to make metal, so how to make plows, you know, thinking historically. But also when we talk about the gift of fire, we're talking about consciousness, about the light of consciousness, awareness. So they go from being instinctive animals to developing consciousness. And Zeus is sitting on Mount Olympus, and he looks out and he sees all the little fires lighting up on the plains, and he realizes what has happened and that Prometheus has disobeyed him. And so Zeus goes down to Earth, and he's disguised himself, and he goes to see the brother of Prometheus, whose name is Epimetheus, which means hindsight. And Epimetheus, he gives Epimetheus a bride, which is Pandora. It's a beautiful girl. And before Prometheus has said to Epimetheus, beware of Zeus bringing gifts. But Epimetheus ignores Prometheus. And Zeus gives to them a box which is sealed shut. And then he goes on his way. And sure enough, Pandora finds the box and opens it. And out of the box fly all the ills, the evils that beset mankind. So you've got sickness, old age, strife, envy, all the troubles that beset the human race. And she kind of slams it shut, but it's too late. And then she hears a knocking on the inside of the box, and she opens it once more, and it's the little angel fairy of hope. So Zeus has taken his punishment of the human race, and then he punishes Prometheus. He takes Prometheus and has him chained to Mount Olympus. And every day the eagle, which is the bird of Zeus, flies down to Mount Olympus and pecks out the liver of Prometheus. And every night, because he's immortal, his liver grows back. And he's being, he's enduring eternal torment, unending torment as a punishment. And eventually this situation is resolved by Chiron the centaur, who has an incurable wound that gives him constant pain. And he comes to Zeus and asks to be allowed to die, to escape the pain of the body, and in exchange for the freedom of Prometheus. So Prometheus is freed, and Chiron goes to live in the Elysian fields. So, what's the next slide? If we relate this back to Aquarius, let's go on. It's that middle one at the top. It's the humanitarianism. It's Prometheus who loves the human race, and he wants them to be better. He wants evolution. He wants them to evolve. The whole reason for stealing the fire of Olympus is so that the human race can become conscious. And more aware and more awake, and also more skilled with the fire. And that is one of the biggest themes for Aquarius, is the love of humanity, and the longing and the quest for evolution of consciousness. And this is very much the field of Aquarius. And because it's ruled by Uranus, which is not a very embodied sign, it often comes through revolution. That change comes, as we said, with Uranus, with sudden change and sudden death, and all the bloodthirsty acts of the French Revolution and Chinese, Russian killing fields of Cambodia, when revolution does not go well. But the longing, the ideal, is humanitarian and very, very much about freedom. The biggest thing, perhaps even more than the humanitarianism for Aquarius, is freedom. This is the quest for freedom and justice, but freedom, and how to make things better. And there's a Greek word, hubris, which means pride, which is something that defies the gods and says, I know better. And that is Prometheus saying to Zeus, yeah, you've told me I can't give them the fire, but I'm going to give it to them anyway. I'm going to seek consciousness. And, can we create our own destiny? Things like that, which are the big questions for Aquarius. So those are very important issues. No. Oh, I can't find it. Where is it? Oh, must have been right at the beginning. Never mind. Oh, I know it is. Right. The difference between Uranus as ruler of Aquarius and Saturn as ruler of Capricorn. Capricorn likes the status quo. It likes to know what's going to happen next week. It likes to plan. It likes things to be consistent. It likes rules and regulations and to people to stick by the rules. It's quite okay with hierarchy and, and putting in the hard work. This is Capricorn, to achieve your ambition. And Uranus or Uranus is visionary. This is where they really differ. Capricorn is about life on Earth and the limitations of life on Earth, and get on with it and work things out here in the body. And Uranus and Aquarius is seeing the future. Let's find Prometheus. Looking to the future, visionary, original, genius. Bringing in completely new ideas. And
Rebekah?
Yes.
I was thinking as you were talking about Uranus and Kronos, what you said earlier really is depicted by this, because earlier you were talking about how Uranus and Aquarius, I guess, but Uranus rules technology, and that we don't always have the maturity that we need to use it wisely, and we use it destructively and self-destructively. And so Uranus needs Kronos, the discipline of Saturn, and the responsibility and structure of Saturn, in order to really utilize what Uranus or what Uranus is creating, right? The technology and all of the advances, the scientific advances, and that's where they need each other, because I guess Saturn by itself wouldn't come up with those things.
No.
But Uranus, if it's out of control, it needs Saturn.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm so glad you said that, because one of the key words for Capricorn is responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's authority, but it's also responsibility and loyalty. And
discipline.
Yeah, and discipline. And a real Uranian person will lack those qualities. They will be irresponsible and impulsive, and kicking over the rules.
And genius.
And certainly genius, because that's right. From the limited Capricorn thing, you won't get those visions. And nobody is just Capricorn, by the way. Everybody has got Aquarius or Uranus somewhere. But they need each other, absolutely, because Uranus can see things that have not yet come into existence. Prometheus has foresight. And Saturn knows how to work with what is here and how to be loyal and responsible with it. And they absolutely need each other. And people with a very strong Uranus or a very strong Aquarius, they often don't really, it's hard for them. They'll just do the tower over and over again in their life, kicking down the structures, impulsively blowing things apart to let in the vision, but they would do better. That's why I wish that, Gaia and Uranus and Kronos would have had some therapy, because they need each other. As you say, they need to talk to each other, they need to learn to listen to each other, and not be, if you've got too much Saturn, nothing changes and life can be depressing, and it's all about work and plodding through the next day. But if you've got too much Uranus, you've got no consistency, and you never manifest anything, because you're always on to the next idea and the next idea, and discarding those, the creative projects. And if we come back to this, I think one of the, if you want to, when does the age of Aquarius begin? I read one astrologer say, and I think this is right, it was in 1990 with the invention of the World Wide Web, because we have no idea, I think, where this is taking us, the invention of computers and artificial intelligence and all that electronic engineering that is happening, as you know, in all of our lifetimes, the unthinkable changes that have occurred because of technology. And this is very much the province of Aquarius. It's a sort of scientific mind that, and also that originality to envisage something that had never existed before and to bring it into form and to bring it into existence. And that is Aquarius and Capricorn working together. That is Uranus and Saturn making these things happen, constructing, engineering. This is Saturn. This vision of the of communication. That's an Aquarius word. Creating this network. Aquarius likes networks. It likes groups. It's the human race. It's not the individual. It's not even the family. It's all of us. And here's the World Wide Web. You know, technology potentially connecting every person in the world. And we may be afraid. I think we may have reason to be afraid of, you know, technology and what it might bring. But it's coming. You know, we can't turn it back. I mean, I'm sure we all know, you know, the younger a person is, the more adept they are with technology, with social media, with phones, with computers. For them, it's absolutely second nature. When my granddaughter is 8 and she's not allowed to have a phone, so right, but when she was about 3, I was showing her a photograph on my iPhone, and the photograph disappeared. And before I did anything, her tiny finger came out and went bloop on the icon on my phone screen, and the photograph popped back. And I didn't even know how to do that, but she did. She was 3. And so these kiddies, they are wired for this. Their brains are developing in ways that for our generation. And right, so let's have a look at the next screen, not this one. Yeah, so let's look at Uranus. So Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, and it's Uranus who is this incredible idealist and visionary and original. It brings in, you know, we can do it differently. But he's also, the other thing with Uranus, I think, is that those of us who do this work of meditation or energy healing or whatever, Uranus is what gives us higher sense perception, gives us the ability to go to other dimensions of consciousness. Uranus and Neptune, also Pluto, but Uranus and Neptune, and not Saturn. Well, I'm sure Saturn does too, actually. But Uranus is one of the planets that, you know, anybody with a strong Uranus, they opens the 6th eye, opens the crown chakra, so that you can sense into other dimensions. And that's where the originality comes from, because Uranus just bings away from reality, off into the sky, out into the cosmos, and comes back with some completely new idea. So we're entering the age of Aquarius. We're in this time of Uranus. We've got everything crumbling, you know, things, the Capricornian things are decaying in front of our eyes. You know, Pluto ruling decay. So what's happening with Uranus? And in 2018, Uranus entered Taurus. And this is not a sign that you think of at all with Uranus. It's full in Taurus, for those who... Taurus is the earthiest of the earth signs. It's all about the body. It's all about living in a human. It's much more. Taurus is ruled by Venus, so it's not so austere as Capricorn can be. Taurus loves life on earth, the life of the body, nice food and drink and music and sensuality, and beautiful art and poetry. That's Taurus, but it's about being here, and it loves relationship and sexual and sensual and being in a body and being beautiful. So they're very, very different principles, because Uranus is a head case, he's out in the mind and he's doing sums and mathematics and being very clever. And but being very technological as well, very scientific and about electricity, lightning. What is Uranus going to be like in Taurus? And it's in Taurus until 2026. So we've got another 3-4 years. And I want to go back to Gaia. And I think this journey of Uranus through Taurus is very, very important. So Gaia is the goddess of the earth. She's very, very much associated with Taurus. This wonderful planet, this miracle of creation. And if you just think about the body and the self-healing properties of the body, as long as we are alive in this body, how it sorts itself out and it does all the things it's supposed to do, and how the trees grow from little seeds, mighty oak tree, how things flower and then they fade, how the rivers, do their work, and the glaciers, the volcano, and the miracle of life on earth. The miracle of sight and hearing, the miracle of the senses. This is all Taurus, the 5 senses. How does that happen? And, so I didn't have that, fortunately, when I had COVID, but my son, when he had COVID, he lost his sense of taste. And my best friend did. And there was one point in the middle of having COVID where she was sort of sending me messages almost like, I don't want to live without my sense of taste. If I can't smell the flowers, if I can't go into the forest and smell the rain, I don't want, I don't want to be in this body. That's how important the senses are to us. She's got her sense of smell back. And we're living in this time of Extinction Rebellion and climate change and, and the great fires that you've seen in America and in Australia, and temperatures off the scale in India, and people dying. And then we get migration, because if you live in somewhere that's suffering desertification, and your lovely land is dying in front of your eyes, and the animals are dying, you got to head north. You got to head to the west, and then politically we don't like it. So our planet is in trouble ecologically. And of course, we know that the planet won't die, but the human race may die if we don't get our act together. Gaia will renew herself. She will create new life forms. She will eventually sort it out. But we have a chance. We have a window at the moment. And here is Uranus in Taurus, needing to learn how to make a relationship. Well, that's quite a lot of writing there, but this is about the new science, which is talking about the consciousness of vegetable life. That under the earth, there's this great, vast civilization of roots, the mycelium network of all the plants, and the discovery that that plants have chemicals that are the same as the chemicals that we have in our nervous system, so that the roots of the trees and the grasses and the flowers are communicating with each other. What is this? Lotman say the plants with large root systems have more than 14 billion brain-type neurons in their roots, which can even rival the human brain. And then when you look at the mycelium network of the smaller roots that are everywhere in the soil, you're looking at a combined neural network larger than any human being has ever possessed. What else have we got? I think there's some before that. Let's go back to this. Well, actually, what I know what I'm going to go back to is this. There's back to the artificial intelligence and the genetic engineering. And as we move into the age of Aquarius, and, you know, the world that my granddaughter will grow up into, these things are here, artificial intelligence and genetic engineering. And this is a worry that in the hands of the wrong people, there can be such a vast scale of destruction that happens. And can we work with Gaia? Can Uranus and Gaia create a relationship in these last few years? And you know how Uranus is the sky god, and he's out in the cosmos, and he's bringing back these original ideas. And in terms of the human energy field, and in anybody who does meditation, it's Uranus coming out from through the seventh chakra, out from the cosmos, and coming into the body. And can we bring it all the way through and down into the earth and connect with that mycelium network? Can we make those conscious connection with nature, with the planet? Can we honor nature in the decisions that we make? And where is it? And I think in this, we are talking about the evolution of consciousness. And this is what is the opportunity that we are offered in the journey of Aquarius. Aquarius rules groups, it rules friendships, it rules any kind of network. But I think in our times, we can go to a much deeper level of understanding of the real meaning of that than we have, I mean, experientially, because Teilhard de Chardin died in the 20th century. These words are not new. But can we access this deeper level of consciousness that connects us all? So Jung talks about the collective unconscious, that every human being, their consciousness rises out of this great sea of the collective, and that we individuate, and each one of us is so unique, and that is so important to life. But underneath us is this great ocean of consciousness. And David Bohm, who's a 20th century physicist, talked about, it's a good theory, it's a respectable theory, that inside of the world that we know is another order. It's the implicate order. Let me see what it says. Where space and time are no longer the dominant factors. There's an entirely different sort of basic connection of elements in the implicate enfolded order. And from this, our ordinary notions of space and time and the idea of separately existent material particles are abstracted as a form which is derived from the deeper order. Explicate forms, the life of form, the life of Saturn, Capricorn, Kronos, have unfolded from an underlying implicate order. So beneath our feet, beneath our souls, is a place where we are all connected, where it is the collective unconsciousness, and where we energetically We are not separate. And this is what I feel is happening in our times. My personal experience in groups, meditating together, is that I can kind of experience this underlying connectedness, the underlying oneness of all life. Now, mystics and enlightened people have always talked about the oneness of life, and it's a great theory. But what I feel is open to us now is to experience that, is to go through some kind of portal and to really feel the oneness in a small group, just meditating together. More perhaps, we're not, and this is very interesting, the work of Patricia Albert, the evolutionary collective. Each of us has an origination point, a point of light where the source of our existence, which radiates out into the world. So it comes from the source, and learning how to influence it, be in relationship with each other with clarity of consciousness, and the ability to speak to each other about what is occurring between us is a subtle dance. But it's this experience of being with another person in a kind of semi-meditative state, but to be energetically aware of the connectedness. So instead of it being a theory of Teilhard de Chardin or of Jung or David Bohm, to feel it kinesthetically, emotionally, to feel a heart energy of connecting to other life forms. And to so much for it to go from being a theory to being the experience. And I think that's what's happening. I think this is what is happening for people who are ready, who have done the work, who've done the self-transformation and years of meditation and psychological work and awareness, and they've read the books and connected with nature and the indigenous peoples and the wisdom that they bring, and how we're learning all of this. And it feels to me as though something chemical is happening, and alchemy is occurring, where the idea of the oneness of all life is becoming something you can experience. And this, but this, I feel, yes, at this point in history, we develop the ability. The image of the great tree of life. This is the gift of Uranus and Taurus, that this is the gift of Uranus in relationship with Gaia. That we open that great channel, that vertical power current that connects us down into the earth. We've all done that in meditation, where you're putting your roots deep, deep down into the earth, because she's our mother, and this is where we came from. And this is this is what our bodies are made of. They're made of Gaia. And then but also to be able to open out to the cosmos, to the beyond, to the places where things are not yet in form, and to bring those together. And where do they meet? They meet in the heart. And it's in the heart and where we experience that we are surrounded by love, that we are in a sea of love, and it never goes away. The only thing that goes away is our consciousness of it. And that every being, every living thing is part of this ocean. And that includes Donald Trump and Putin and Hitler. That we're all part of this ocean. Nobody isn't. It's not possible not to be. And more and more and more, I think this is the gift of Aquarius, which I don't even think has been written about enough, that it's leading us through the group, because it doesn't happen on your own. It happens in a group. I mean, when I first started meditating, I really noticed the minute you're in a group, the power of it is so much more than, you know, and it's not that it's not wonderful on my own, but when I'm with others, things happen, things move. And it's the power of the group, and it's the need of us for each other, and the recognition that we love each other. The recognition that on that underlying level, in David Bohm's implicate order, in Jung's collective, that we are in love with each other. And then we come out into our, you know, into our manifest life, and we be Kronos, and we're going to castrate anybody who doesn't get it right, or we be Uranus, and we are impulsive, and we keep knocking things down and rejecting them, and we hate each other. We have the revolutions where we chop people's heads off, and we have the killing fields, and we, you know, whatever else. So, you know, when we're lost in our human mind and all the archetypes battling each other, then we create harm, and we harm the earth. But this is what I think the age of Aquarius is going to be about, is when the consciousness of universal unconditional love as the only reality that underpins everything, and learning how to get that to flow through into the manifest world. I think this is the gift of Aquarius. This is the journey that we are just beginning. You know, and terrible as things have been, and traumatic as COVID has been, and politically, my God, traumatic. Nevertheless, I feel grateful to be alive, because I've had a glimpse. You know, that my life path has taken me to have a glimpse of this possibility.
Rebekah. We're almost out of time, and I thought you might want to just open for questions.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Excuse me. There are a few comments in the chat.
Yep.
So Scott Silverman mentioned Prometheus the Awakener by Richard Tarnas. He wrote
Yes.
Cosmos and what
Yep.
was Nikki?
Yep.
Yeah, I have that book. A groundbreaking book. And Sharon, thank you, Scott. And then Scott, this is a beautiful way to describe the Promethean side of Uranus. That's a wonderful explanation for the humanitarian aspect of Aquarius, since there is ancient Saturnian side to Aquarius. When we strive to work with Uranus Aquarius, it's not just about welcoming or innovating new ways of Promethean right action, but also retaining the best proven and established ways of higher humanity.
Yes.
And then also highly recommended documentary, Fabulous Fungi, includes
Yes.
much about plant communication, beautifully done. And Alain Gauthier says, can you say a few words about Uranus return at age 84? And Scott Silverman is complimenting you on the graphics, lovely graphics.
Yep. Yes, they're not mine. They're borrowed. Uranus return at 84. That's kind of, you know, something that was very rare in the past and becoming much more common. And, you know, in my experience, the second Saturn return is so much easier than the first one.
Mm.
The thing with human life, you know, is that when we're young, we're very, very vulnerable. And things like a heavy Saturn transit or a heavy Pluto transit can finish a young person off and give them immense pain. And by the time you make it to being 60, it's you kind of got much more of the Saturn, because Saturn rules old age. So you got that Saturn energy, and it's like, yep, you know, so here's a bit more of a reckoning time. And I wonder about Uranus. Hopefully, a person who makes it to their Uranus return will have done a lot of what Gloria was just saying, like because what we're seeking is the union of Saturn. We want them to work together, Saturn and Uranus, not either or, not only Saturn head down, work until you drop kind of thing, and not Uranus impulsive, knocking everything over and running away. That if the visionary, the Uranian, can meet with the grounded, responsible Saturn, that's when you get real creativity. And hopefully when a person gets to be 84, it could be the opening of a very, very creative portal.
Yes, I remember reading once in one of my astrology books, it might have been Robert Hand, who said that if you make it to 84 and you get this Uranian transit return, it's like it's like a rejuvenation of sorts. And I saw that in my father when he was 84. We took him, he was born in Brazil, raised in Brazil, and he hadn't been there for decades. And he said, he always said he wanted to go one more time before he died. And we took him, and it was like he lost 10 years. He was just radiant. And I thought, oh, this is what Robert Hand meant about the Uranian transit.
It's a very youthful planet, Uranus. It's not interested in getting old gracefully or anything like that. That's
yeah. Isabel Hickey says the keynote of Uranus is, "Behold, I maketh all things new."
Yeah,
Right.
Loves the new, loves beginnings. Yeah, yes, not good at seeing them through, and that's when you need the Saturn.
Right.
And we're going to see that, we're going to, as we move more and more into the age of Aquarius, there's going to be a lot of invention, and it's a very, very creative sign. And as we started by saying, the hope that we can do this embodiment so that we are honoring the earth and our responsibility to the earth and our responsibility to each other as, human beings of heart, with whatever transpires with the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Scott also said in the chat, astrologer Lee Lehman has pointed out we now have a generation of healthy practicing astrologers living and working past 84. Expect some great and amazing research and empirical observation. Fingers crossed.
Great.
Oh,
yes.
And Alain is asking, can you give the title of Robert Hand's book? It's Hand, H-A-N-D, like your hand, I think it was Planets in Transit.
Yep.
I think that's where I read that. I'm not positive, but it's a wonderful book anyway.
Oh.
And Scott says, wait to buy it in a revised version that's coming out soon. Oh, I didn't know about that. That's great. Contact the publisher. It's overdue.
Thank you.
Sharon, you had a question earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt Rebekah.
Yeah, that's okay. She touched on generations recently born or being born being wired differently. I think she used the word wired. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that at least 2 other times in recent years. The first time I heard it, I kind of dismissed it and thought it sounded kind of kooky, but I keep hearing it. The most recent time, other than Rebekah mentioning it today, I heard it described as wired differently, but then the person elaborated and said they're able to tap into kind of higher levels of consciousness more readily. It's just easier for them to access. So I guess I just wanted her thoughts on that, and if she could just say a little bit more about, young children that have been born, those yet to be born, and a little bit more about their quote wiring.
Yep. So I'm not in any way medically trained, but I teach art, and I'm working with a young lady with autism. And I mean, in the last 3 years, I feel we have to get away from thinking of it as a problem, and it is a problem, but it also isn't, it's also a gift. And I feel her sensitivity and her original, anyway, I mean, that's very anecdotal because that's one person. We're getting all these diagnoses of neurodivergency. Maybe it was always like that. Maybe we were all ADHD and we didn't know back then. We don't know that. And it looks, on the face of it, like it's a problem. And I think we're just learning how to be with this. And I saw a talk with a guy who's a genius who has autism, and he's saying, my mind can see things that your mind can't see. And I'm way up here with that. But then with this, I'm no good. And so that's one thing, is that whatever, this thing of neurodivergency. Yeah, I think I say that rather glibly, that they are wired differently. It's just I'm blown away by the way the young people, and I'm talking about anybody under 40 really, they just use this language where the jargon of talking about technology and social media, that I haven't got the words for it. And sometimes I'm sitting there and thinking, I don't understand. I understood the words that you said. I have no idea what all that means. And that is kind of what I mean, is that that's what, I'm trying to think of it, if there was anything, the nearest thing I can think of is when my parents were very, very scornful about the Beatles. And I was listening to them over and over again. And but then my parents came to like the Beatles anyway. So I don't think that's the same. I think this facility with technology and the jumps that you make with, the bits in between that you don't have to do with technology. I think they just, I don't know whether it's in their chemistry or they just learned, I don't know if it's nature or nurture. They can just do it.
Yeah.
They don't have to think about it. They have to struggle with it. And what does that mean? I remember when my boys were young and they were sort of playing video games, and I knew parents who were trying very hard to stop them. And I just thought, and I still think, there's something's trying to happen here. I don't know, in science fiction, maybe we're trying to build a brain with this great World Wide Web and, and all the little mobile phones and satellites and what have you. Maybe a diabolical thing is trying to happen. I don't think so. I think it's potential to be diabolical, but I don't think it is. I think there may be a purpose. There may be a divine purpose that's coming through. And it's very, very different to what I was talking about with that sort of meditative connection, on a spiritual level with other human beings and connecting through the heart. This is the very Aquarian, the brilliance of the mind. And it's just so important. And then that is one of the things with the neurodivergent kiddies, you have to come to them with your heart, and they're very, very sensitive. Mm-hmm. And, and if there's violence or violent language, they, that's when they freak out. So.
Thank you.
Scott mentions, not to mention Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance.
Yeah.
Yes. Oops. I lost.
very Aquarian thing.
Hold on a second. Here it is. Yes, Rebecca, it probably is in their chemistry. Think of the chemicals they built bodies out of, different ratios than earlier generations. What an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Christy says, thank you, Rebecca, and all. And oh gosh, I hate to end this discussion, but we're out of time.
Yeah, that went really quickly.
It went really quickly. Scott says, great lecture.
Yeah,
It
very good.
was.
Thank
It
you.
was really enlightening and inspiring. And I thank you, Rebecca, for once again, your presence with us and someone else.
Pleasure.
And one new message. Uranus, Neptune children, what a generation now in late 20s, early 30s. Yeah. So thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I hope you'll come back to us soon, and we'll see as the year goes on what
Yes,
we can
yes.
add. And thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah.
And we have an event coming up on the 31st that is soul medicine, and it's about, I thought of it several times during your lecture when you were talking about the ancients and the Greeks. What he does is he teaches about the ancient Greek and also indigenous ways of healing, and how we need to incorporate the idea that it's an imbalance in the soul, in our alignment with the soul.
Oh God, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, that's on the 31st. It's Edward Tick. Edward Tick is his name, and he wrote a wonderful book on dreams many years ago, which I love, The Practice of Dream Healing. And this is kind of a where he talks about Asclepius, who Chiron raised and who surpassed Chiron in the healing arts, and then was raising people from the dead because he was such a great healer, and Zeus couldn't stand for that, so he killed him, but he told him he could live on Mount Olympus as one of the gods because he had done so much good. And so they had these Asclepian temples, all over Asia Minor for 1,000 years, where people would come and they would dream, and they would ask the god to give them a dream, and then the priest would help them understand their dream, and the dream would tell them how to heal.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. So anyway, that's on the 31st. Thank you again, Rebecca. It's always wonderful to see you. And
lovely to see you. And thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca. Wonderful program.
Pleasure.